a while, I
Okay,
realized
good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch
that the
broadcasting from the
motif of the
Mushroom
DMT
Mansion tonight.
encounter, and I guess I should
Working on
describe it
oil
briefly.
painting,
When you burst into the DMT space,
Chinese
you have the
food,
impression
buck a
that you're in
scoop
a
prelude to
domed
the apocalypse.
space,
Had to shift gears for a second there.
approximately the size of the length
But
of
took
this
yesterday off.
room, but round, with a somewhat
I'm just going to start
lower
playing with some color
ceiling,
right now.
indirectly
Laying in a
lit,
little bit of color
warm,
across the
comfortable.
figures and the
And the
table
moment you get your
and the surrounding
bearings,
environment.
they're there.
Maybe, actually, I
In
might
fact,
leave
as
the
you
window
break
pane
into that
and the
space,
walls
they
blue and the
cheer.
floor as well.
And
But
some of you
anyway, I'm
may
going to put
know
in some
that
color
song
on
by the Pink
the
Floyd from
figures and the
years
table to
ago.
start.
The
Here we go.
gnomes have learned a new way to say hooray. So you break into this space. They scream their greeting. And while you're just trying to get oriented, they come bounding forward, somewhat like dogs, actually. And they begin to lick your face and crawl all over you and jump in and out of your body. And they say, we love you, you send so many, you come so rarely, welcome, welcome. And so you're like, trying to take your pulse, trying to make sure you're breathing, because you have the impression this is so serious that I may be dead. I may have just simply killed myself 10 seconds ago, and this is what's happening. They use their voices to make objects. They speak a language which you do not hear, but which you see. You not only see it, you feel it. And so they use language to cause syntactical, architectonic, techno structures to condense out of the air. And when they show you these things, they're proud of them. They come bounding forward and jump up and down in front of you and say, look at this, and they're all competing like children to show you this stuff. And as you direct your attention into one of these objects, you see beyond any power of contradiction that this thing that they're showing you is impossible. They're constantly transforming themselves in the most amazing way. And they're showing you this stuff, and they're saying, do what we're doing. You can do this. Use your voice to make something. And you're like, this is now 30 seconds into this experience. Reality has been obliterated, and you're just in this place. Well, and one can do this. And there is a glossolalia, and then these objects condense out of the air. And the objects themselves are somehow alive. You put one down, and they emit sound and make subsets of their own type. And all of this is just, you're just like, my God, what has happened? The strange thing about DMT is it doesn't affect your mind in the ordinary sense, so that you're not ecstatic or freed of anxiety, or you're exactly who you were before this started happening, with all your neuroses, fears, doubts, and you're saying, is this all right? Am I going to be okay? How long is it going to last, so forth and so on. But the point I wanted to make, that I got started on a few minutes ago, is after many of these exposures to this, I have realized, and I think I'm right, that this environment into which you are catapulted, bizarre as it is someone very strange. It's their idea of a reassuring environment for a human being. They are so marvelous to you because you've never seen anything like it. But on the other hand, you've just been born into this world and trying, and this is why I think perhaps it is a bardo. Perhaps it is an after-death, I don't know if maternity ward is quite the phrase, but it's where you start your existence in this other dimension. But in the same way that a baby lying in a bassinet in a maternity ward could hardly conceive of growing up to drive Ferraris, collect art, and crush the competition. You lying there in this nursery, in this playpen, how can you extrapolate what lies beyond that space? Because clearly the entire space has been prepared for baby, and you're the baby. So you can't figure out, is this the entirety of this universe, or how far does it extend? And I suspect that when you die, this is what you get, and that familiarity with the after-death vehicle, that DMT actually is a thanatoptic compound, and that this trip is you are peeking over the edge into eternity. And, questions you never thought you would have answers to are answered. Just, is there life after death? You bet. Next question. On that note, let's go to dinner. Thank you.
I was wondering if you thought that, have you always been a knowledge junkie, or have psychedelics increased your enthusiasm for violin or the capacity for it?
I've always been sort of a knowledge freak. I mean, I was a very weird kid. I knew I was weird when it was happening, but now that I have a 15-year-old son and watch how he does it, I realize how absolutely weird I was and how alarming I must have been to my parents. And I was not socially adaptable at all because I had bad eyes and poor coordination, and I was very easily intimidated. And the story of my early schooling was in a town of only 1,200 people, I was able to find 1,700 different ways to get from school to my house in order to avoid being pounced upon by roving cannibal bands of my peers who had sworn to get me, and they never got me. It was astonishing. And no, this was some cow town in western Colorado. The other thing I discovered early on, and maybe this is too psychotherapeutic to waste time on, was that I could hold them at bay with story. And essentially I became like the king's jester, I became, and then I could hang out with these lumbering, lumpen people because I was always willing to verbally outrage and say crazy things. I mean, like one of my things that really got me a lot of points with the tough guys was I could stand up in class and very rapidly speak sentences into which I could occasionally drop obscenities, but you just couldn't quite hear it. But the kids could hear it, but the teacher couldn't. And it was this... So that was my scene. But in terms of the relationship to knowledge, I love, it's what William Blake said, he said, attend the minute particulars. And that's what's interesting, I think, is the details of the distinctions among things. I mean, that's why I was a butterfly collector, an art historian, a Tibetan art hound, a rainforest botany person, because what it's all about is the incredible variety of morphological expression in the world. Now, I suppose a Buddhist would recognize this as a serious samsaric hang-up, that I love the texture of the apparent visible world. It's funny that you asked this question because in my morning meditation this morning, I had this image of a work of art, which many of you know, I'm sure. It's Dürer's etching of Melancholia, and it shows an angel in the foreground, and she has the instruments of geometry, and there are zoological collections and maps spread out, and a orrery of the solar system, and she's holding her head, and this strange geometric form is beside her. Well, I've put a lot of study into this geometric form and tracing its history and so forth, but that wasn't what caught my attention in the meditation this morning. It was that I realized, or I recalled, that someone had said that this might be a medically accurate portrayal of migraine, and perhaps the earliest, because Dürer was interested in pathology. And then I got the thing for the first time, which was that the angel has a headache because of the proliferation of this technological artifactory of all sorts that is spread around. And it's this amazing picture of historical exhaustion. I don't know how I got off onto that. But anyway, this thing about complexity and appearances, I think the way to get into reality is by running the edges, as I've said. And for me, the entry drug was science fiction, definitely, because that permitted anything. I suddenly got the idea, the imagination sets the parameters. If it will work in your head, that's good enough. You don't have to go further than that. You can build machines, societies, organisms, relationships in your head. And if when you run it, the gears turn and the wheels go and it works, then that's it. It works. You don't have to go further than that. And well, it sort of is working here. I mean, I'm amazed at what I'm seeing happening. I mean, I have the feeling that we're just calling it into existence, that it's working. You know, just don't drop the ball, don't jinx it, nobody say too much, but it's turning, I can feel it. I mean, it's like turning a battleship with a canoe, but it's turning. You know, and it's enormous, so it's very hard to deflect its momentum. Nevertheless, by holding this point of view, somehow it's working. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I wouldn't have believed it possible. It is that the world is made of language, and it is that by a certain act of contained concentration, if you are with the Tao, it begins to shed its secret, or it begins to open ahead of you. What's that thing by W.H. Auden about a glacier rattles in the cupboard, the desert sighs in the bed, and the crack in the teacup opens, a door to the land of the dead. It's that, you know, it is a linguistic structure. You can decondition yourself sufficiently to actually step outside the cultural illusion. It's a breathtaking possibility because nobody knows what's outside the cultural illusion. I mean, you know, Plato got it right. We are chained in a cave watching the flickering shadows of something. But life taken with sufficient seriousness and pushed hard enough at the edges, then this stuff will give itself up to you. And it isn't about belief. It isn't about commitment to guru or dogma or method. It's about observational integrity. It's about witnessing and some kind of primacy of self. In other words, you have to believe that you can tell shit from shinola. And when you say it's shit and they tell you it's shinola, you have to vote with your own side, you know. And it's very interesting. The world is like a labyrinth, or as I said yesterday, it will be mastered by a feat of understanding somehow. It's like a riddle, yeah.
Give some advice on how to avoid the pitfalls of mushrooms, the danger of mushrooms. The supply is irregular for those of us who don't have an open botanical garden. From time to time, there's physical problems. Is there anything correct?
Yeah, well, the very best thing is to grow them. And this is not as difficult as it's been made out to be. And, you know, the dedication of half of a small closet will get you, your friends, and their friends absolutely smashed. And the other thing is, I mean, I'm serious about urging it. It may sound exotic, but if you want to meet the alien and have a relationship with something very strange that loves you, but that is very, you know, a lot different from a house cat, you should grow this stuff. First of all, it's white as the driven snow. Melvillian associations aside, there's something to be said for this. And then it will take rye, which you buy in a health food store for $17 per 100-pound sack. And it will take rye and it will convert it with a 12% efficiency to dried mushrooms. 12% efficiency to dried mushrooms. I mean, this thing is like, it just wants to enslave itself to you. It will work like a dog. I've never seen anything like it. And it promotes virtues such as cleanliness, the primary virtue in Western civilization, attention to detail, awareness of scheduling, all these grounding qualities, and then at the end it will deliver to you, you know, the alien body of the higher and hidden unspeakable. And I suppose I should say that my brother and I wrote a book about how to do this, which you can is around. It's not under the name McKenna. We did it pseudonymously. It's called Psilocybin, the Magic Mushroom Grower's Guide. But literally, if you want to turn your life into pure science fiction, this is the way to do it, because then you have it, and it's not the dried stuff that's rubbery that only works half the time that costs an arm and a leg. It's the living quintessence of the thing, and my Lord, I mean, from that point, you know, you are your own Magellan. And need take lessons from nobody, because the universe that it opens up to you is so large that really you can be confident you'll see things nobody's ever seen before or will ever see again. And technically it's not that difficult. I mean, it's at the level of a hobby. It's a little trickier than canning jam. It's up there with growing sprouts in little trays or culturing yogurt or something like that. Yeah.
Can you maybe say a couple of words also about DMT and what sort of situation I haven't had it before, and just as a first time, how to set it up and maybe some ideas and words.
Well, DMT is, you know, regrettably very rare and hard to get. I did notice that the last issue of a magazine called Psychedelic Illuminations that's published in Southern California, that you can probably get at the Phoenix or the Bodhi Tree, published the recipe, published 4 pages of chem abstract saying, just in case you were wondering, an interesting phenomenon is going on, which is, we haven't talked about this much this weekend, but briefly it goes like this. As many of you probably know, there is a South American hallucinogen called ayahuasca that is orally activated DMT, and it's orally active because it's complexed with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, in this case harmine, which comes from a large South American vine called Banisteriopsis cacti. Well, hardcore plant psychedelicos all over North America have begun to realize then that this formula, DMT-containing plant plus MAO inhibiting plant, boiled together, concentrated, gives you some kind of pseudo-ayahuasca. And people are experimenting furiously and producing ghastly brews and amazing stories, and in some cases, actually getting it right. What seems most promising is it was just discovered, now here's an example of ethnobotanical progress. It was just discovered about 2.5 years ago that a plant in the American Midwest called Desmanthus illinoisensis, the Illinois bundleweed, a plant that has no particular folk history or anything, it's just a problem plant on the prairie, has more DMT in the root bark than any plant ever measured on this planet. And no history of human usage, although to me it's suggestive that it's called bundleweed because that suggests medicine bundle. But maybe that's just a coincidence. Anyway, the Indians claim they don't know from it. Well, you can take that plant and scrape the root bark, and then there is another plant that grows widely in the American West, and the seeds of which are sold in Iranian markets all over the country as incense. A plant called Pergamon harmala, the giant Syrian rue, and it contains not harmine, but harmaline, which actually is a more hallucinogenic cogener than harmine. So what people are doing is they're taking Pergamon harmala and shredding it and boiling it with Desmanthus illinoisensis root bark, and they're producing a North American analog to ayahuasca that works. And this is a very interesting development on many levels because it means people are essentially concocting their own unique, personalized brews. It also means that probably Pergamon harmala, which I'm not kidding, in these Iranian markets they call it hermal, and for $6 they'll sell you a pound of it, which has enough harmaline in it to flatten your entire apartment house. Pergamon harmala, as a source of this MAO inhibiting harmaline, can probably be used to activate all of the DMT containing plants in the flora of North America, and there are many. There are, first of all, a whole family of grasses, the phalaris grasses, Phalaris arundinaceae, I can't remember, several others. They cause staggers in sheep and are identifiable grasses. There are a number of species of acacia. Acacia confusa contains DMT. There's a plant out in the Central Valley of California that clogs the locks, the canal system, but they spend millions of dollars dredging and piling up mountains of this stuff. The root bark of that, Arundodonax, it contains DMT. So people are out there scrambling, and if you were of a witchy turn of mind, this is something to fiddle around with. There's nothing more satisfying than finding your way to that moment where in your head, it begins to glitter and you realize, it's here, it worked. Theory and practice in perfect concert has delivered outrage. So that's a possibility, yeah.
They're saying that life on Earth started a lot earlier than they thought. They thought it started like 6 billion years after the Earth stabilized, when it was only like 400 million years. And that it was very possibly, one of the ideas they had was that it was started by spores from outer space.
Yes. Eventually, you see, this is what I said, that they will come to us, because, that is that's almost like a freebie. because it is, all you have to do is like just wake up for a moment and realize that, of course, space is not an impermeable barrier to life. I mean, it's a tough barrier, but I've been in the Seychelles and in the Hawaiian Islands. These are mid-ocean islands that have been populated by life that has drifted in there. And when you think about the fact that a single Stropharia cubensis mushroom in the sporulation phase, which can last up to 3 weeks, sheds 3 million spores per minute for 3 weeks, one mushroom. One mushroom. So, and then you have, the dynamics of the atmosphere. They pick up off the Antarctic ice shelf chunks of Mars half the size of your head. This is now established that an asteroidal impact on Mars ejected material into Martian orbit that eventually percolated into Earth orbit. And now the way meteorites are prospected for is they eventually put it together that on the Antarctic ice shelf, where the wind is blowing 150 miles an hour most of the year and cutting the ice away, that you could fly, and there's no land. What you eventually would get to is the Antarctic Sea, that you can fly over those ice shelves in helicopters with high-powered binoculars, and any black spot is a meteorite or an asteroid fragment, because what the hell else could it be, And they've like tripled the world's inventory of meteoric material in the last 5 years through this prospecting technique. They have found a whole box
All right.
full of 20 different specimens that they
I like the way that's
confident
developing
are
so
lunar
far.
material, ejected
But I'm not sure
from cometary
which way I'm
impact.
going to take it, as
But
far
two
as slow
strong
blending
candidates
shadows
for
with deeper
Martian
tones,
origin. We're talking
or
about
maybe with a
fist-sized
deeper blue
domes,
for all
So the
shadows, something like
notion
that.
the
Skin tones,
percolation
tabletop tone,
spores
share
and
tones.
biological material,
So I'm going to cut it
is
here
not possible.
and come
I
back
think
for a second session after I've mixed up a few more colors. Be a dark blue or a dark gray for his shoes, 2 different skin tones, and a tabletop tone. So, yeah, I'll be back in a few minutes.
intoxications that they are
Take 2.
describing. It's not sitting around, seeing the wallpaper move. And, well, they were eating it.
And cookies and brown LSD cocoa bread. Why did that lose fashion? Is there a danger in it?
No, I think when pot went from $15 a lid to $475, people stopped cooking with it. But let me say this about eating hashish. If you're going to do this, I recommend that you eat Lebanese hash if you can, because you see, Lebanese hash is made in a way that people don't really touch it, in the same way that charas is made in India by people whose hands may not be so clean, and you're going to take a hit essentially of the ambient bacterial population of the village of Hamarubitsar, and your guts will go completely berserk. This is one argument for baking it in a cookie, is to get the pathogens at least smacked down a bit. But if you've never read Fitzhugh Ludlow's book, The Hashish Eater, Confessions of a Hashish Eater, it's hilarious. I mean, here it is. It's 1852, and he's at Union College in Riverdale, New York. He's been invited to the dean's tea, and he's just taken this massive hit of cannabis jelly before arriving at the tea. And he says something like, when the umbrellas protruding from the Oriental umbrella stand turned into gargoyles, I knew that I must excuse myself, lest I run the risk of betraying my condition. Meaning, I'm too loaded, I've got to get out of here. Let me say one more thing about this. There's a wonderful book called Shaman Woman Mainline Lady that is writings by women about drugs. And if you want to read something that just will make you roll on the floor with laughter, it's Louisa May Alcott's account of a picnic she and her friends went on with a doctor, somebody or other, and it's just the most insane thing. I mean, it's these incredibly pretentious Victorian femmes with this doctor by this river in the English countryside, and it's Lil and Nell and Dolly says, "Oh, doctor, we're so exhausted with canasta. Surely you have some new little divertissement that you can share with us." And he says, "Well, Dolly, I do have this little case of the best Moroccan hashish bonbons from Paris." And they say, "Oh," and then it's madness. It's just the most extraordinary thing. Yes.
Does cannabis work on the brain or chemically? Does it stop?
It's not very well understood. There is a receptor, but cannabis is not an alkaloid. Cannabis is technically a polyhydric alcohol, which makes it a chemically unique type. It's also botanically unique. Cannabis is what's called a monotypic genus. In other words, these three species, Ruderalis, sativa, and indica, which are all obviously speciated within historical time and can, by chromosomal studies, be shown to be all derivatives of Russula, the Central Asian wild type. It has no near relatives, and so it's unique and it's not well understood. As far as somebody asked about using it psychedelically, I think that the real, and I can't say I do this because I need it for other reasons, but in terms of the pure psychedelic issue, the way to do cannabis is once a week in silent darkness, alone, with the best stuff you can get, and then just, do as much of it as you can possibly do in a shorter time and sit with it. You will every single time be absolutely torn to pieces by it, I mean, it's just astonishing. The problem is that people get into it, myself included, for other reasons than that hallucinogenic flash. But that would really be the ideal way, and also it would prove you were a person of great rectitude and self-control if you could do that. Yeah.
In one of your books, you mentioned the idea of nostalgia for paradise as part of perhaps the unconsciousness, and maybe that was formed during the psilocybin paradise period. Do you see in 2012 us having to abandon that, or will it be fulfilled by?
Well, this phrase, nostalgia for paradise, I don't know who invented it. When I first encountered it in Merciliad's book, Cosmos and History, which if you've never read this book, it's a little book. It was one of the most influential books on my thinking because I saw there a whole different way of talking about spiritual reality. But I disagree with Iliad that it is simply a attitude in the human mind. I really think there was a fall, and that this is a diminished condition, and that there was some kind of cohesion that we do have this nostalgia for. That's why I think our whole relationship to drugs is all about the fact that, I mean, look here, here's the metaphor. We're like the children of an abused relationship. Something was taken from us 15,000 years ago. It was the thing which kept us in balance with each other, with the earth. It kept us in our imaginations, in the poetic world of natural magic. And then it was taken from us. And it was a big downer. And life turned into history and warfare and subjugation and classism and all of these things. And the thing that was taken from us was this intoxication. And so then we moved on to alcohol, to money, to opium, because that was very big in the Minoan phase. I mean, opium would have a huge influence on Minoan civilization. And all of these things, an effort to scratch an itch that you can never quite reach. But in the meantime, all kinds of addictions, wars, criminal syndicates, horrible things go on. Now, in the 20th century, through the science of anthropology, a complete inventory, essentially, is taken of the world's intoxicating possibilities. It's part of the complete inventory of the world's people, languages, technologies, belief systems that characterizes anthropology. But there it is. In 1953, Gordon Wasson returns from the village of Huautla de Jimenez in Sierra Mazateca, and he has the body of Eros, pickled in a jar, lost since the fall of Minoan Crete, but suddenly restored. And then nobody knows what to make of it, and the CIA looks at it, and Hoffman looks at it, and now it is found, I think. And I don't know if it comes too late, or if the final irony is that we learn what it was all about, but nevertheless have to succumb to the momentum of our own stupidity. In other words, it's some kind of Greek drama, where you have this horrible realization and fully understand the whole bit, but you're doomed anyway, just because it makes for better theater. Or whether it is the preferred, the happy ending of the Christian eschaton. What the 9th century's best tools were for cognizing these kinds of matters were scholastic theology. And I've been accused of that, So what scholastic theology says is that there is something called the nunc stans, the eternal now. And that somehow, this all goes back to this wonderful thing which Plato said. Plato said time is the moving image of eternity. And my notion of what this is all about is that the time wave we looked at last night is eternity. It's the fractal structure of the temporal module viewed from a higher dimension. And then time is the traversing of that thing. The nature of the singularity is hard to anticipate. If you use the old fractal principle of ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, do you all understand what that means? It's the phenomenon of that a fetus, as it develops, ontogeny, recapitulates the evolutionary history of life on the earth. That's phylogeny. In other words, the fetus is first a little kind of a thing, an amoeboid mass of cells, and then it becomes sort of like a salamander, and then it becomes like a primitive mammal, and so forth and so on. Well, using that principle to try and anticipate the end state seems legitimate in the fractal, under the fractal dispensation. However, it leads to the conclusion that when you look at an organism, what happens to all organisms is that they die. So then that leaves you with the conclusion that what happens at the end date of the whole enchilada is the equivalent of some kind of mass dying. Well, then that really doesn't tell you much, because we don't know what dying is, We don't know whether that means that how can the ultimate novelty be complete extinction?
it must be then that we have to overcome, as positivists, our phobia against this area of speculation previously presided over by beady-eyed priests, and actually take it back and say that in the mysteries of metabolism and morphology, it is perhaps now necessary to entertain the idea that death is not a nihilistic release into non-entity, and that instead the shamanic model is correct, and that biological life is a sojourn into matter, and that at death, you do go to some incomprehensible unfoldment, only the first moments of which can be made sense of. Because I really think the DMT thing is like bungee cording into the bardo. I mean, there you go, and then just as it jerks you back, and so you get that much of a look into the yawning grave. And I take it as it's strange, yes, but surely reason for hope and optimism. How much of oneself, whatever that means, is going to be carried over, I don't know, but it looks to me like probably not much. But what lies ahead is, well, to quote Bilbo Baggins, the greatest adventure still lies ahead. I'm pretty convinced of that, which surprises me because I'm a cynic, and I'm not easily swept into optimism.
Well, you just had a great little preamble in your analogy with scholastic theology lets us know what is going to be the defining event of 2012. The collected works of Terence McKenna are published under the title Summa Mycologica.
I'll take it. Yeah.
What cautions and reservations do you advocate in like this dance with color? We talk about the revival, and sometimes I wonder if we remember what we're talking about, or that in this possible great ecstasy there lies more.
Some danger.
Yeah, I guess I'm constantly asking that question as I have taken a 4.5-year break from drugs and moving back in that direction and having consumed some mushrooms recently and wanting to, like, in this revival of the use of these substances, I feel like it needs to be absolutely reverent and to be sensitive to what I'm doing.
Well, the danger, I mean, as I see it, and I feel it very strongly, and the danger is, just to put it out there, is madness. I mean, we talk about stretching the envelope, we talk about running the edge, but you don't want to rip the envelope. You don't want to island yourself in a situation where nobody can make sense out of what you're saying. And yet, that's the game we play, is always pushing. So what you said about reverence and absolute impeccability of attitude, and also I think it's very important to be physically together. It's important to be physically together anyway. I go to a gym 3 days a week, and I think of it as preparation for psychedelic voyaging, because if your body is a clean instrument, you can do it. The other thing is technique. I mean, in the psychedelic state, if there are problems, there are techniques to deal with them. The best technique, and Western people don't naturally gravitate toward this, but if you get into a place you don't like on a psychedelic, sing. You must sing. Most people's tendency is to cringe. This is very bad because it can just grind you to nothing.
What you have to do is you have to sit up and you have to sing, and it doesn't really matter what you sing. You will find the song. I mean, start out with row, row, row your boat and go from there. The other thing is, the real issue I find in myself is surrender. That it's all very fine to sit here getting paid dollars per minute extolling this stuff, but boy, is it different to do it. You can talk all you want, but the thing is so, I don't know if scary is the word, but it's so total what happens, and you're so vulnerable, and you know that if there is any flaw in your approach or attitude, that flaw will be magnified by the stress of the thing and become highly problematic. So it's all about asking the question, am I ready? Now this is not how beginners approach it, nor should they. It's incredibly forgiving of first, second, and third timers. But as it takes you in, what it gives is a certain measure of, for want of a better word, let's call it power. And the payback on that existential validity would be another way of calling it rather than power. The payback on that existential validity is that you have to be okay. And, maybe it's my Catholic upbringing or something, but one cannot do the examination of conscience carefully enough because there's always flaw. So it's about, staying right with it. It teaches the right way to live and also surrender. That's why I don't ever have an agenda. I regard having an agenda as essentially aspiring to be a magician of some sort. And I don't. I want to witness it. I am perfectly content to be present at the miracle. I don't want to do the miracle, and I don't want the miracle to be done to me. I just want to be there. Frank Herbert, in his book Dune, said something which over the years I found, though it sounds flimsy to say, it actually works. Some of you may recall that in that book, they had this drug called Stroom, and it did pull you out through time. It was not just a drug. It revealed, like I'm saying psilocybin DMT do, the real structure of reality. And in there, they discuss what do you do about the fear that comes with the gigantic, awesome dimensions of this vision. And he says, or someone tells the main character, fear is like a wind, and it blows through the mind. And what you must do is you must wait. And it cannot sustain itself unless you give it an object. And this is actually true, I found, that fear, whatever it is cognitively, physiologically, it's a chemical wave of release of adrenaline. And what you do is you just sit and watch it come like a bell curve and then recede, and then you're still on the surface of the ocean and the power of it has been defeated. But if you give it any object to cling to, it will break white water and then the chaos will overwhelm you. Yeah.
Talk about the difference between psilocybin and ayahuasca experiences. I'm particularly interested. I heard you talk once about how the value is the psilocybin experience being more technological and the ready to be part of the planet type of value, whereas ayahuasca is more save the planet.
Feminine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, somebody once said to me after they took a mushroom trip, they said, I don't think I'll do that anymore. And I said, why not? And they said, because I'm not interested in insects that drive spaceships. Which sums up psilocybin pretty well. Psilocybin is Apollonian.
and hortatory and grandiose. And it's interesting that they have these personalities. I mean, psilocybin is kind of megalomaniac. I mean, it says history is ending, prepare for the departure, the crisis of the species is upon us, cosmic forces are intersecting, machines the size of Manitoba will be involved, and it's all about, mankind prepared to depart for the higher orders of the galactarian hegemony, and this whole thing like that. And ayahuasca is all about how rivers flow,
Okay,
family lines.
I get some basic colors blocked in, and I'll see how I treat it from here, whether or not do some slow blending on the shadows. What I think I will do next is block in the ground and wall with a deep blue and then a lighter blue, probably ultramarine, maybe a phthalo, I'm not sure, I'll play with that. And then do some highlights and details. But I'm kind of liking the flat color, so we'll see where it goes from here. But that's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico. Working on oil painting Chinese food. Buck a scoop, prelude to the apocalypse. Have a good night, Earth.
Literally looking